Hello. I, well, getting ready to go out for breakfast. Then hanging door hangers around the town. Y'all should grab a few for your neighbors. We are into Revelation chapter 2, verses 8 to 11. I'm just going to make it work, and we're going to get through one of these each day. We're now to the persecuted church. And this is where I kind of wish I had my notes. There's some great stuff I could quote to y'all. But I will mention, we did one church a Sunday when we taught the book of Revelation. So if you go check out the Revival Church app or YouTube or whatever, you can get the 45-minute version of these 7 churches. And there's a lot more details and cool stuff in there. Verse 8 says, to the angel, messenger, leader, whatnot, of the church of Smyrna, write, these things says the first and the last, who was dead and came to life. I know your works, tribulation and poverty, but you are rich. And I know the blasphemy of those who say they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. Do not fear any of those things which you are about to suffer. Indeed, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison, that you may be tested, and you will have tribulation 10 days. Be faithful until death, and I will give you a crown of life. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. He who overcomes shall not be hurt by the second death. So, Church of Smyrna. This church represents the persecuted church. And the persecuted church, you could somewhat timeline to about 100 to about the year 312. Throwing out some numbers there. The idea mainly is that after the apostles died, there was already persecution taking place. But, there was the apostolic church, the church under the 12, under those original disciples of Jesus. And then after they were gone, much of what had been going on continued to go on. But we see for the next 200 some years, just great persecution. And it isn't until 313 that we see the Edict of Milan, where Christianity is supposed to be made protected and not persecuted by Rome, and it becomes the formal religion of the Roman Empire. And we see the formation of the Holy Roman Church. That's not till next time. So, the persecuted church. You'll notice Jesus in his introduction in verse 8, the second half, he refers to himself as the first and last, who was dead and came to life. And there's an emphasis there. Like I said, every time Jesus describes who he is, it's supposed to be ministering to them at where they're at. These people were being martyred. They were being killed for their faith. And so Jesus reminds them of who he is. I was dead, but I now live. And it's an encouragement for them. And there's something cool about the 7 books, or the 7 letters to the churches in Revelation. It's that reminder that Jesus, in him, we find all we need. In Christ, we find those solutions, those answers. The more we know him and who he is, the more it helps us know that we have a great high priest who can sympathize with us. We have someone who's an advocate for us. He's a mediator for us. And it goes on and on and on. The first fruits of the resurrection. And so, really, this persecuted church, he's trying to keep their eyes off of the temporal and on the eternal. The Church of Smyrna is, out of 7 churches, there's only 2 that don't receive a rebuke. Special prize for whoever names the other church other than Smyrna. Got to be first, though. And so there's no rebuke, but they're persecuted. They're persecuted unto death. And so he tells them, I know your works. I know your tribulation. I know your poverty. And so those words, the word tribulation there, um, thlipses, it means crushing, crushing. And so then we've got, let's see, Rick, Phil. Technically, there's Philadelphia, and there's also Philippi. So if you say Phil, that could be confusing. Anyway, just give me a hard time. So the crushing, your employment, the crushing you're going through, your object poverty, like they're going through hard times. But then he tells them, but you are rich. And you see, it's a letter like this that ministers to churches in Africa, to churches in Asia, to churches hiding underground in Iran. It's hard for Americans really to relate to this. And even whatever it is we've gone through, that we don't have this. Not right now, at least. And so he's telling them, though, no matter what you're going through, you are rich. I know you're working hard. I see what you're struggling through. But in heaven, riches await you. It's funny because the last church that he's going to write to, he calls them out saying, you think you're rich. You think you have all this stuff, but you're actually naked and poor. That's more like America. I mean, people think they have so much and what we've accomplished and what we've accumulated, but then you're going to enter into heaven and not have a whole lot. And he talks about the Jews who are not really Jews, but are the synagogue of Satan. And what he's talking about was that they were being persecuted also a lot by the Jews. And this persecution, especially up until 135 AD, Jerusalem's destroyed in 70, but it's the second revolt where the Jews are totally expelled out of Israel. That's 135 AD. There was a lot of animosity between the Christians and the Jews. And what Jesus is saying is that these Jews who call themselves Jews, ethnically they're Jews, but they've rejected their Messiah and they are doing wicked and evil things. I mean, you look at the stuff, at the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, and these Pharisees and these high priests, they knowingly were wrongfully condemning a sinless man to be crucified, but they wouldn't enter the Praetorium, Antonia Fortress, because they didn't want to be defiled, lest they couldn't eat the Passover meal. And so that just shows, like, outwardly they were doing a lot of Jewish stuff, but inwardly they weren't really Jews. They didn't really have hearts for Jehovah, hearts for God. And so that's what he's talking about here, is that they're really the synagogue of Satan. He's like, these people are actually the pawns of Satan. And that's not all Jewish people, right? That's just talking about these people who outwardly they're doing these feasts, these festivals, these things, but inwardly they're persecuting and they're killing Christians. So Jesus calls them out, and he's just trying to minister to this group. And so he just tells them, do not fear. It's literally the command to stop fearing of any of those things which you are about to suffer, because you're going to get thrown into prison, you're going to be tested. It talks about 10 days of tribulation. This is where sometimes those symbolic words, what's the significance of 10 days? Was it a literal 10 days? It might have been 10 days literally. What we can do is go back to the equivalent of Revelation in the Old Testament. In many ways, Daniel is the main, not main would not maybe the right word, but it's a significant prophetic book of the Old Testament concerning the end times. And in chapter 1 of Daniel, we find that those people were tested for 10 days. And it seems to be a time period that was just an accepted period of time. Test us for 10 days, see if we don't look good on our special diet, and then, we'll be approved. And here it seems as if this 10 days is alluding to that. It's just a period of testing. God's allowing you to go through a period of testing, because a faith that is not tested is a faith that cannot be trusted. That's the idea, is that God's going to allow you to go through some testing so that when you come out the other side, you know that it's the real thing. I have real faith. I'm really going to endure. When I get tested, I don't know, I want to say it was a John Corson quote, but Christians are like tea bags. You never know exactly what you've got until you pour some hot water on it. And that's the truth. That hot water, that testing, it it brings out the real flavor of what's going on inside. And so this church was allowed to be tested by persecution. And he lets them know in that closing verse that he who overcomes shall not be hurt by the second death. He says, they might kill you the first time, but they can't touch you the second time. Now, one thing I really wanted to mention is what's cool about this second letter is that John had two main disciples that we know of historically, two men that were really trained under John. And one of those men was Polycarp. Kind of a funny name for us, I guess, but Polycarp. Polycarp became the bishop of Smyrna. And so here in Smyrna, this is where he ends up being martyred, Polycarp. And we have Polycarp's letter to the Philippians. You can actually read some of Polycarp's writings, and it's kind of cool because Polycarp talks about his master, John the Beloved. And so this is the kind of stuff, it's not the Bible, but it's kind of fun to hear stories of the Bishop of Smyrna, this very man who would have been receiving this letter. So the guy who this letter is written to, we can read some of his writings. And Irenaeus was the disciple of Polycarp. And Irenaeus would tell stories about, he's essentially the spiritual grandson of John. And he would talk about how, Polycarp would always tell me, when John would talk about Jesus, how he would just light up and he'd glow and the love that would just emanate from him. So it's kind of fun to hear these, friend of a friend stories, but they're stories, we can't get anywhere else. And so it's pretty rich stuff reading some of these early church father writings, some of the earliest that we have. Polycarp dies an old man, just like John. And as it goes, he was saved pretty young, got saved as a young kid. And I don't remember all the details, but as the story goes, that they wanted to kill him. He was a wanted man. And so on the run from Rome, he went from house to house. They were moving him from house to house, trying to keep him away from the hit squad that was trying to come and get him. In the end, they finally realized they couldn't hide him any longer. And the hit squad comes to the house. And when they get to the house, they find him there, not hiding, but in the living room, and he's cooking. And they come in and, we're here to arrest you. And he said, that's fine. I've prepared dinner for you. And if you would allow me to pray while you eat, go right ahead. And so the Roman soldiers sat down and enjoyed a nice meal. And he went and prayed for about an hour. And he prayed aloud, and they could hear him praying. And he prayed for the forgiveness of the soldiers because they know not what they do. And all of this. And these soldiers, it's funny because they wanted to let him go at this point. The way he behaved, his hospitality, his prayers, they wanted to let him go. And so when they take him in, they try and persuade him. And they say, listen, they're going to kill you. But if you just would reject Christ, they'll go easy on you. And Polycarp, and this is where my numbers, I don't have the number, it's like 70 or 80 years. It's a big number. I don't remember the exact number, but he basically said, for 80 years, he has never failed me once. I will not fail him now. They take him to an arena and they tie him up, and they put the sticks around him to burn him at the stake. And he declares that he's like, I will not be burned at the stake this day, And they light the fire, but something strange is the fire won't consume him. The fire whisks around him, but he doesn't get hit by the fire. So finally, whether it was a sword or a spear, I don't recall, but they run him through. And the story goes that the blood gushed forth out of his guts and extinguished all the flames as he was praying for the people. That was Saturday, February 23rd, 155 AD. I have a reminder in my phone. Um, so, yeah, cool stuff. I've got another reminder in my phone coming up on a Sunday in April. There's a very special anniversary coming up. You guys will just have to wait and see. But very good stuff. There's a rich history in the church. When those of us who've done our discipleship class, we've been doing the early church history, and I've really thoroughly enjoyed it because when we looked at Hebrews 12:1, and it talks about because we're surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, we would never exhaust the Bible and the things there are for us to learn in it. But there is definite fruit, encouragement, exhortation, lessons to be learned from the many saints who've lived over these last 2,000 years. And hearing their stories, the people who've kept the church alive, the people who've kept the church going, who have preserved sound doctrine, the people who fought against heresy and fought against everything in order to keep, the Bible preserved for us. And God was never going to let it go away. That's what we'll do in Kings on Sunday night, is how it's like, God was never going to let the line of David cease. But there were a couple times there it looked pretty close. And so the persecuted church, they experienced much, but God's faithfulness to them remains evident. And their faithful martyrdom and what they left behind for us, it's something worth learning about. And so my encouragement to you, maybe go find out who Polycarp is. Wikipedia. I don't trust them for most things, but if you just want to know who the guy is, go check out Polycarp and Irenaeus. Go figure out what the Didache is and the Epistle of Barnabas and the Shepherd of Hermas. I mean, these are I'm listing the stuff that this is within the generation of the apostles. All those writings are within a generation. Irenaeus was later, disciple of Polycarp, but those other ones, it's all early church. Some of them may predate the book of Revelation when they were written. And just in case people ask, because it's always a good question, right? Why are they not in the Bible? Because they weren't meant to be in the Bible. Just because they're old doesn't mean they were supposed to be part of the Bible, but they're definitely fascinating reads. So if you want to do something different, some of those things like the Didache, again, it's like a 7-minute read. So check it out. God bless you guys. Have an amazing weekend. I am excited to continue in 2 Kings at our church. I hope you guys are at church on Sunday, a church somewhere. And I pray to God that they are teaching the Bible. So enjoy yourselves. Have a great day. And I'll see you guys later.